The silence at the Thanksgiving table was deafening when my sister-in-law Claire announced I was completely useless in front of the entire family. What she didn't know was that I had been secretly documenting her embezzlement from our family business for months, and by dessert, the FBI would be knocking on her door with enough evidence to put her away for years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Chen, and at 52 years old, I thought I had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of family dynamics. For the past 8 years, ever since my husband Daniel passed away from cancer, I had been quietly managing the financial side of Chen Family Catering, the business Daniel and his brother Marcus had built from nothing 20 years ago. What started as a small food truck serving authentic Taiwanese dishes had grown into a successful catering company with 15 employees and contracts with some of the biggest corporations in Seattle. After Daniel's death, Marcus had insisted I stay involved in the business. "Danny would want you to be part of this," he had said, his voice thick with grief that matched my own. "You understand the numbers better than anyone, and this company is as much yours as it is mine." I had been grateful for the lifeline. The business gave me purpose during those dark months when getting out of bed felt impossible, and working with the recipes Daniel had perfected made me feel close to him still. What I hadn't anticipated was how much Claire, Marcus's wife of 3 years, would resent my continued involvement. From the beginning, she made it clear that she viewed me as an unwelcome reminder of the past, someone who needed to step aside so she could take her rightful place as the only Mrs. Chen in the business. Claire was 15 years younger than Marcus, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her calculating blue eyes. She had married Marcus just 18 months after Daniel's funeral, and I had tried my best to welcome her into the family despite my reservations. The first signs of trouble had started about 2 years ago, when Claire began questioning every decision I made regarding the financial management of the company. She would schedule meetings without including me, make suggestions about modernizing our accounting practices, and drop hints about how much more efficient things could be with fresh perspectives. Marcus, clearly smitten with his young wife, began deferring to her judgment more and more often, even in areas where she had no experience or expertise. I had worked in corporate finance for 25 years before Daniel's illness forced me to step back from my career to care for him. I knew how to read financial statements, spot discrepancies, and manage cash flow. Claire had a degree in marketing and had worked at a boutique clothing store before marrying Marcus. Yet somehow, her opinions about our business operations carried more weight than my decades of experience. The breaking point had come 6 months ago during a particularly heated discussion about expanding our catering services to include wedding planning. Claire had presented an elaborate proposal involving partnerships with florists, photographers, and venue coordinators. The numbers she presented looked impressive on the surface, but when I analyzed them more carefully, I discovered that her projections were wildly optimistic and based on market research that seemed questionable at best. "Claire," I had said carefully during that meeting, "I think we need to be more conservative with these projections. The wedding industry is extremely competitive, and we don't have experience in event coordination. Maybe we should focus on what we do best." Her face had flushed red, and she had turned to Marcus with an expression of wounded indignation. "See what I mean? Victoria is stuck in the past. She can't see the potential for growth because she's afraid of taking risks. This is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps small businesses small." Marcus had looked uncomfortable, caught between his loyalty to me and his desire to support his wife. "Maybe we could start smaller," he had suggested. "Test the waters with a few events before we commit to such a big expansion." Claire had smiled sweetly, but I caught the flash of anger in her eyes. "Of course, honey. We'll do whatever you think is best. I just want our business to reach its full potential." That night, I had gone home to my quiet apartment and poured myself a glass of the wine Daniel and I used to share on Friday evenings. As I sat in my living room, surrounded by photos of our life together, I made a decision that would change everything. If Claire was determined to push me out of the business Daniel and I had helped build, I needed to protect myself and Marcus from whatever scheme she was hatching. The next morning, I had opened 3 separate bank accounts at different financial institutions. Into the first, I began automatically depositing my salary from Chen Family Catering. Into the second, I transferred money from my personal savings, creating what I privately called my emergency fund. The third account remained empty for the time being, but I had plans for it that Claire would never see coming. I also began keeping meticulous records of every financial transaction related to the business. Every invoice, every payment, every expense report. What I discovered over the following months made my blood run cold. Claire had been systematically embezzling money from the company, using her access to the business credit cards and her influence over Marcus to hide her theft. It started small. Personal purchases disguised as business expenses, inflated invoices from vendors who turned out to be friends of hers, consultation fees paid to marketing companies that existed only on paper. But as her confidence grew, and Marcus continued to trust her implicitly, the amounts became larger and more brazen. She had stolen nearly $80,000 over the past 18 months, and Marcus had no idea. I had spent sleepless nights debating whether to confront Marcus directly with what I had discovered. He loved Claire deeply, and part of me worried that he might choose to believe her denials over my evidence. Worse, I was concerned that she might manipulate him into thinking I was the one who had been stealing, using my grief and supposed instability after Daniel's death as an explanation for why I would betray the family. Instead, I had decided to build an ironclad case against her while quietly protecting the business and Marcus from further damage. I began photographing documents, saving email chains, and creating a detailed timeline of her fraudulent activities. I also started moving money from the business accounts into the third secret account I had opened, telling myself I was safeguarding funds from Claire's continued theft. If questioned, I could always claim I was protecting the company's assets until the situation could be resolved. The evidence I collected painted a picture of someone who viewed the business not as a family legacy, but as her personal piggy bank. She had charged expensive spa treatments to the company card, claiming they were client entertainment. She had hired her unemployed brother as a social media consultant and paid him $5,000 a month for work that consisted of posting occasional photos of our food on Instagram. She had even submitted receipts for a weekend trip to Las Vegas, claiming it was a, quote, market research expedition to study catering trends in the hospitality industry. Most damaging of all, I had discovered that she was planning to convince Marcus to take out a substantial business loan, ostensibly to fund her wedding planning expansion, but actually to cover the shortfall her stealing had created in our operating expenses. The loan application she had prepared contained false information about our revenue and expenses, and if approved, it would saddle the business with debt payments that could force us into bankruptcy within 2 years. As
preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Thanksgiving approached, I knew I couldn't wait much longer to act. Claire had become increasingly hostile toward me, making snide comments about my outdated approaches to business and questioning whether someone still stuck in the grieving process should be making important financial decisions. She had also begun pressuring Marcus to formalize her role in the company, suggesting that she should be named Chief Operating Officer with full authority over business operations. The final straw had come just 3 days before Thanksgiving, when I discovered that Claire had forged my signature on a check made out to one of her fake vendor companies. She had stolen my identity to steal from the business I had helped build with my late husband. The violation felt personal in a way that all her previous thefts hadn't, and I knew the time for patience and careful documentation had passed. I had spent those 3 days putting the finishing touches on my plan. I contacted an attorney who specialized in corporate fraud, providing her with copies of all the evidence I had collected. I reached out to a former colleague who now worked for the FBI's white-collar crime division, giving her a preliminary overview of what I had discovered. Most importantly, I had transferred every remaining dollar from the business's operating accounts into my secret account, leaving only enough money to cover our employees, paychecks, and essential expenses. When Claire discovered that the business accounts were nearly empty, she would have 2 choices: confess to her theft and explain where the missing money had gone, or try to blame me for the shortfall. Either way, I would be ready with evidence that would expose her crimes and protect Marcus from further manipulation. The Thanksgiving dinner was being held at Marcus and Claire's house, a sprawling suburban home that had been purchased shortly after their marriage, with what Marcus believed was money from Claire's inheritance. I now suspected that inheritance had actually come from her systematic theft from our business, but I had been unable to prove that connection definitively. As I drove to their house that Thursday afternoon, carrying a homemade apple pie and a folder containing copies of all my evidence, I felt a mixture of nervous anticipation and grim determination. I had spent 8 years trying to honor Daniel's memory by preserving the business we had built together. Tonight, I would either save that business from Claire's greed, or go down fighting to protect what was left of our family legacy. The house was already full of relatives when I arrived. Marcus's elderly parents had flown in from California, along with his sister Janet and her teenage children. Claire's parents were there too, along with her brother Tommy, the one who had been collecting $5,000 a month for his non-existent social media work. The dining room table was set with Claire's expensive china, and the smell of roasting turkey filled the air. "Victoria!" Marcus greeted me with a warm hug as I handed him the pie. "I'm so glad you're here. Mom and Dad have been asking about you." I hugged Marcus's parents and made small talk with Janet's kids, all while keeping one eye on Claire as she flitted around the kitchen, playing the perfect hostess. She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most of our employees made in a month, and her jewelry looked suspiciously expensive for someone whose only legitimate income came from her part-time work at the catering company. "Victoria, darling," Claire said sweetly as she passed by carrying a platter of appetizers, "would you mind helping me in the kitchen? I could use an extra pair of hands." I followed her into the kitchen, wondering if this was where she planned to make her move. Instead, she handed me a bowl of cranberry sauce and smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. "I'm so glad we'll have a chance to work together more closely next year," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Marcus and I have been talking about restructuring the business, and we think it's time for some fresh leadership in the financial department. Someone with more energy and modern ideas." The implication was clear. She was planning to push me out of the business entirely. I smiled back and stirred the cranberry sauce. "That sounds interesting, Claire. I'd love to hear more about your plans." "Oh, we'll have plenty of time to discuss it after the holidays," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "For now, let's just focus on having a lovely family dinner." As we carried the food to the dining room, I noticed Tommy whispering something to Claire that made her laugh. Whatever he had said, it seemed to put her in an excellent mood. She was practically glowing as she called everyone to the table and began serving the meal. The conversation during dinner was pleasant enough, with Marcus's parents sharing stories about their early days in America and Janet's kids talking about their college plans. I found myself genuinely enjoying the company, reminded of why I had always loved these family gatherings when Daniel was alive. For a moment, I almost regretted what I was about to do. Then Claire decided to make her announcement. "Before we have dessert," she said, standing up and tapping her wine glass with a fork, "I want to share something exciting with everyone." She reached over and took Marcus's hand, beaming at him with what looked like genuine affection. "Marcus and I have decided to take the business in a new direction. We're going to expand into full-service event planning, and I'm going to be taking over as the Chief Operating Officer." There were murmurs of congratulations around the table, and Marcus's parents looked pleased. I kept my expression neutral, waiting to see where this was heading. "Of course," Claire continued, her smile becoming slightly sharper, "this means we'll need to make some changes to our current management structure. We've realized that some of our team members are just too set in their ways to adapt to the modern business environment." She looked directly at me as she said this, and I felt everyone else's eyes following her gaze. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. "Victoria, honey," Claire said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my teeth clench, "we know how hard you've tried to contribute to the business, but let's be honest. You're completely useless when it comes to innovation and growth. You're stuck in the past, afraid of change, and frankly, you're holding us back." The silence that followed was absolute. I could see the shock on Marcus's face, the embarrassment on his parents' faces, and the uncomfortable shifting of everyone else around the table. Claire had just publicly humiliated me in front of the entire family, calling me useless, as if I were a broken appliance that needed to be discarded. But instead of feeling hurt or angry, I felt a cold calm settle over me. This was exactly what I had been waiting for. Claire had just given me the perfect opening to destroy her completely. "That's interesting, Claire," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Since we're talking about the business, maybe this would be a good time to discuss some concerns I've had about our financial management." Claire's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, Victoria, I don't think Thanksgiving dinner is the appropriate time for boring financial discussions. I think the family deserves to know what's been happening with their company," I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out the folder I had brought. "Especially since you've been systematically stealing from it for the past 18 months. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Marcus's fork clattered to his plate, and his mother gasped audibly. Claire's face went white, then red, then white again. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you make accusations like that in front of my family?" "They're not accusations," I said calmly, opening the folder and pulling out a stack of documents. "They're facts, supported by documentation that I've been collecting for months." I turned to Marcus, whose face had gone ashen. "Marcus, did you know that Claire has been charging personal expenses to the business credit card? Spa treatments, shopping trips, even a weekend in Las Vegas that she claimed was market research?" "That's a lie," Claire said, but her voice was shaking. "I've never done anything inappropriate with company funds." "Really?" I pulled out a credit card statement and pointed to a highlighted charge. "Then how do you explain this $800 charge to Bella Spa and Salon, which you claimed was for client entertainment, but which actually paid for your monthly facial and massage package?" Marcus leaned over to look at the statement, his face growing darker as he processed what he was seeing. "Claire, what is this?" "It's a misunderstanding," she said desperately. "Sometimes I do take clients to the spa. It's a legitimate business expense." "Which clients?" I asked, because I've checked our client records, and none of them have ever mentioned spa visits with you. I pulled out another document. "And what about your brother Tommy's consulting fees? $5,000 a month for social media work that consists of posting 3 photos per week on Instagram?" Tommy, who had been trying to make himself invisible in his chair, turned an interesting shade of purple. Claire shot him a warning look, but the damage was already done. "That's legitimate marketing work," she said, but she was clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "Is it?" I pulled out a comparison chart I had prepared, because I hired a professional social media consultant to evaluate Tommy's work, and she estimated that what he's doing should cost about $200 a month, not $5,000. Marcus was staring at the documents with a mixture of shock and growing anger. "Claire, I need you to explain this to me right now." But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out the most damaging evidence I had compiled: the fake invoices, the forged signatures, and the falsified loan application. "Marcus, did you know that Claire has been creating fake vendor companies and paying them with business funds? Companies that don't actually exist except on paper." I laid out copies of the invoices, along with documentation showing that the business addresses were vacant lots or residential homes. "She's stolen nearly $80,000 from the company over the past year and a half." The room erupted in chaos. Marcus's father started asking rapid-fire questions in Mandarin, while his mother clutched her chest dramatically. Janet's kids were staring wide-eyed at the unfolding drama, and Claire's parents looked like they wanted to disappear through the floor. "You're lying," Claire screamed, standing up so quickly that her chair fell backward. "You're making all of this up because you're jealous that Marcus chose me over your precious memory of Daniel." The mention of my dead husband sent a flash of genuine anger through me, but I kept my voice level. "I'm not making anything up, Claire. I have bank records, credit card statements, canceled checks, and email correspondence. I've also been in contact with the FBI's white-collar crime division, and they're very interested in your activities." This was a slight exaggeration. I had spoken with my former colleague, but no formal investigation had been opened yet. However, the effect on Claire was immediate and devastating. She went completely white and swayed on her feet. "FBI?" Marcus whispered. "Victoria, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your wife has been committing federal crimes," I said, pulling out the loan application Claire had prepared. She's been planning to take out a business loan based on falsified financial information, which constitutes bank fraud, and the forged signatures constitute identity theft. I handed Marcus the loan paperwork, watching as he recognized his own forged signature on several documents. She's been planning to saddle the business with debt to cover up her theft, Marcus. If this loan had gone through, Chen Family Catering would have been bankrupt within 2 years. Marcus looked at Claire with an expression of complete betrayal. Is this true? Have you been stealing from our business? Claire's composure finally cracked completely. You don't understand, she sobbed. I was trying to help. The business needed modernization, needed fresh ideas, and Victoria was blocking everything. I was going to pay it all back once we got the loan and expanded into event planning. By committing more fraud? I asked. By lying to banks and putting the business Daniel and Marcus built at risk? Don't you dare bring Daniel into this, Claire snarled, her tears replaced by pure venom. You've been using his memory to manipulate this family for years. You're nothing but a pathetic widow who can't let go of the past. The cruelty of her words hung in the air, but I felt oddly detached from them. I had been preparing for this moment for months, and nothing she could say would hurt me more than the damage she had already done to Daniel's legacy. Actually, Claire, I said, reaching into my folder one last time, there's one more thing the family should know. I pulled out bank statements from my secret accounts, the ones I had been using to protect the business's assets from her continued theft. Over the past 6 months, I've been quietly moving money from the business accounts to prevent you from stealing anymore. Every dollar you thought you were taking, I was actually transferring to secure accounts that only I control. Marcus stared at the bank statements in confusion. Victoria, what does this mean? It means that when Claire tried to empty the business accounts last week to cover her tracks, she discovered that the money was already gone. It means that every dollar she's stolen over the past 18 months is sitting in accounts that she can't access. And it means that I have documentation of every attempt she's made to access those funds illegally. Claire's face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, realization, and finally pure rage. You set me up, she whispered. You've been planning this for months. I've been protecting the business for months. I corrected. The business that Daniel and Marcus built. The business you've been systematically destroying with your greed. You can't do this, Claire said, her voice rising to a shriek. That money belongs to the company. You're the one who's stealing. Actually, I said, pulling out a legal document, I can do this. As co-owner of Chen Family Catering, I have the right to protect company assets from theft and fraud. Every transfer I made was legal and documented, and every dollar will be returned to the company once the appropriate authorities have finished their investigation. This was the moment I had been building toward for months. I looked around the table at the shocked faces of Marcus's family, then focused on Marcus himself. Marcus, I know this is a lot to process, but you need to understand what's been happening. Claire has been stealing from us, lying to us, and planning to destroy everything Daniel worked for. I couldn't let that happen. Marcus looked at Claire, then at the evidence spread across the table, then back at me. How long have you known? I started noticing discrepancies about 6 months ago, I said. I've been investigating ever since, hoping I was wrong but collecting evidence in case I wasn't. Why didn't you come to me sooner? The pain in his voice almost broke my heart. Because I knew how much you love her, and I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. I needed to have proof that couldn't be disputed. Marcus turned to Claire, who was still standing behind her overturned chair, tears streaming down her face. Is it true? Have you been stealing from the business? Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For a moment, I thought she might try to deny everything, despite the overwhelming evidence. Instead, she seemed to collapse inward. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. It started small, just a few personal expenses when money was tight. But then it got easier, and I told myself I would pay it back when the business grew. $80,000, Claire, Marcus said, his voice hollow. You stole $80,000 from our family business. I was going to pay it back, she repeated, but even she seemed to know how hollow the words sounded. Marcus's father, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up in heavily accented English. In Taiwan, this woman would be in prison already. You bring shame to our family name. The rest of the dinner dissolved into chaos. Claire's parents gathered their things and left without saying goodbye, clearly mortified by their daughter's actions. Tommy slipped out shortly after, probably worried about his own legal exposure for accepting money he knew was stolen. Marcus's parents retreated to the living room, speaking in rapid Mandarin and shaking their heads. Marcus sat at the table staring at the evidence, while Claire alternated between sobbing apologies and angry accusations that I had orchestrated everything to destroy her marriage. "This isn't over, Victoria," she said as she finally gathered enough composure to speak coherently. "I'll fight this. I'll prove that you're the one who's been stealing." "You're welcome to try," I said calmly, packing the documents back into my folder. "But I think you'll find that my attorney and the FBI are very interested in the evidence I've collected. You might want to start thinking about getting a lawyer of your own." As I prepared to leave, Marcus caught my arm. "Victoria, what happens now?" "Now you decide whether you want to press charges or try to handle this privately," I said. "Either way, every dollar she stole will be returned to the business. I've already spoken with our accountant about restoring the proper financial records. And the business? The business will survive. It's stronger than Claire's greed, and it's built on something more substantial than her lies. Daniel would be proud of what you've accomplished, Marcus. Don't let her take that away from you." As I drove home that night, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and relief. The confrontation I had been planning for months was finally over, and Claire's reign of manipulation and theft had come to an end. The business Daniel and I had helped build was safe, and Marcus was finally free to see his wife for what she really was. My phone buzzed with a text message as I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage. It was from my attorney, confirming that she had filed all the necessary paperwork with law enforcement and that formal charges would likely be filed within the week. Another message came in from my former colleague at the FBI, thanking me for the detailed evidence I had provided and letting me know that Claire's case would be assigned to an agent who specialized in corporate fraud. But the message that surprised me most came from Marcus, sent just an hour after I had left his house. "Thank you for protecting Daniel's legacy. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss how to move forward?" I climbed the stairs to my apartment, thinking about how much my life had changed since Daniel's death 8 years ago. I had lost the love of my life, but I had discovered reserves of strength and determination I never knew I possessed. I had been betrayed by someone I had tried to welcome into our family, but I had protected the business that represented everything Daniel and I had worked for together. As I got ready for bed that night, I looked at the framed photo of Daniel and me that sat on my nightstand. We were laughing at something off camera, probably one of his terrible jokes, and we looked so young and hopeful and unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. "I kept my promise," I whispered to the photo. "I protected what we built together." The next morning, I woke up to missed calls from 3 different news outlets who had somehow gotten wind of the story. Apparently, Claire's dramatic public humiliation at Thanksgiving dinner had been too juicy for someone in the family to keep quiet, and the story of a grieving widow exposing her sister-in-law's embezzlement was spreading through social media. I ignored the reporters and drove to the Chen family catering office, where I found Marcus sitting in his chair staring at financial printouts. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. "How bad is it?" I asked, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "Bad enough," he said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The fake vendors, the inflated invoices, the personal expenses, it's all there in black and white. I can't believe I was so blind." "You weren't blind," I said gently. "You were in love. Claire is very good at manipulation. That doesn't excuse it. I should have been paying attention to what was happening with our finances." We spent the next several hours going through the evidence I had collected, planning how to restore the business's financial records, and discussing what changes needed to be made to prevent similar fraud in the future. Marcus was devastated by the betrayal, but he was also determined to rebuild the business stronger than before. "I want you to be my partner," he said suddenly, looking up from a stack of invoices. "Not just the financial manager, but a real partner. Equal ownership, equal say in all decisions." I was touched by the offer, but I shook my head. "This is your business, Marcus, yours and Daniel's. I'm happy to help you run it, but it should stay in the Chen family." "You are family," he said firmly. "You've been more loyal to this business than my own wife. Daniel would want you to be my partner." We were interrupted by a knock on the office door. A woman in a business suit stood outside, holding a badge and an official-looking folder. "Mr. Chen, I'm Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. I'd like to speak with you about some financial irregularities that have been reported regarding your business." And so began the formal investigation that would eventually result in Claire being charged with multiple counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and identity theft. The legal proceedings would drag on for months, generating headlines and turning our quiet family business into a cautionary tale about corporate fraud and family betrayal. But that Thanksgiving dinner marked the end of Claire's influence over our lives and the beginning of a new chapter for Chen Family Catering. Within 6 months, we had not only recovered from her theft but had grown stronger than ever, with new safeguards in place and a renewed focus on the values Daniel and Marcus had built the business on. I never did become Marcus's equal partner, but I did accept a more formal role as Chief Financial Officer, with a salary that reflected my true contribution to the business. The secret accounts I had used to protect our assets became the seed money for a legitimate expansion into corporate catering, and within a year we had doubled our revenue. As for Claire, she eventually pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation and full restitution of the money she had stolen. Her brother Tommy was charged as an accessory and received a suspended sentence in exchange for cooperating with the investigation. Marcus filed for divorce while Claire was awaiting sentencing, and the expensive house she had bought with stolen money was sold to pay back the business and cover her legal fees. The last I heard, she was working in the prison kitchen, perhaps finally learning something about the food service industry through honest labor. Every Thanksgiving since then, Marcus and I have hosted dinner for the employees of Chen Family Catering and their families. It's become a tradition that celebrates not just gratitude for our success, but the importance of honesty, loyalty, and protecting the things that matter most. And every year, as I watch Marcus carve the turkey surrounded by people who genuinely care about him and the business we've built together, I think about that moment when Claire called me useless in front of our entire family. She thought she was humiliating me, but instead she gave me the perfect opportunity to reveal her true character and protect everything Daniel had worked for. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply telling the truth at exactly the right moment. And sometimes the person who calls you useless is really just projecting their own fears about their value to the world. Claire learned that lesson the hard way, one federal charge at a time. The weeks following that catastrophic Thanksgiving dinner felt like living in the eye of a hurricane. While the storm of legal proceedings, media attention, and family drama swirled around me, I found myself in an oddly peaceful center, finally free from the constant stress of Claire's manipulations and schemes. The business that Daniel and I had poured our hearts into was safe, Marcus was beginning to heal from the betrayal, and justice was slowly but surely making its way through the courts. However, what I hadn't anticipated was how Claire's desperation would manifest in the days leading up to her formal arrest. If I thought her public humiliation at Thanksgiving had been the end of her attempts to manipulate our family, I was about to learn just how wrong I could be. The first sign that Claire wasn't going to go quietly came 3 days after Thanksgiving, when Marcus called me at 7 in the morning, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Victoria, you need to get to the office immediately," he said without preamble. "Someone broke in last night and destroyed our filing cabinets. All the financial records, all the contracts, everything is either missing or shredded." I threw on clothes and drove to the Chen Family Catering office in record time, my mind racing with the implications of what Marcus had described. When I arrived, I found him standing in the middle of what looked like a war zone. File cabinets had been overturned, papers were scattered everywhere, and our computer equipment had been smashed beyond repair. "When did you discover this?" I asked, surveying the damage. "I came in early to start going through the financial records with our accountant," Marcus said, running his hands through his hair. The front door was still locked, but the back window had been broken. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for. I walked carefully through the debris, noting that while the office had been thoroughly ransacked, certain areas had been targeted more specifically than others. The filing cabinets containing our financial records had been completely emptied, but the cabinets with employee information and client contracts had been left relatively untouched. "Marcus, did you notice anything missing from your desk?" I asked, examining his workspace. He looked around, then opened his desk drawers one by one. "My checkbook is gone," he said, his face paling, "and the signature stamp I use for routine payments." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "What about the spare keys to the safe deposit box?" Marcus rushed to a small locked drawer in his desk, fumbled with the key, and then stared at the empty space where the safe deposit box keys should have been. "They're gone too!" I pulled out my phone and called Agent Martinez, the FBI investigator who had been assigned to Claire's case. While I waited for her to answer, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Amid all the scattered papers and debris, there was a single sheet of letterhead from a local law firm, with a handwritten note that simply said, "Some evidence is easier to destroy than others. This isn't over. See." "Agent Martinez," I said when she picked up, "we have a problem." Within an hour, the office was crawling with FBI technicians and local police officers, dusting for fingerprints and photographing the scene. Agent Martinez arrived shortly after them, her expression grim as she surveyed the damage. "Mrs. Chen, Mr. Chen," she said, approaching Marcus and me where we stood watching the investigation. "I need to ask you both some difficult questions. Is there any chance that this break-in could be related to the evidence you provided regarding Ms. Martinez's alleged embezzlement?" "It's not alleged anymore," I said, handing her the note I had found. "And yes, I'm certain this is Claire's work. She's trying to destroy the evidence before you can build a formal case against her." Agent Martinez read the note, her expression darkening. "We're going to need you both to come to the field office this afternoon. There are some developments in the case that you need to be aware of." "What kind of developments?" Marcus asked. "The kind that suggest Ms. Martinez has been busier than we initially realized." The FBI field office was a sterile, intimidating place that made me feel like I was in a crime drama rather than real life. Agent Martinez led us to a conference room where several other agents were waiting, along with a woman I didn't recognize who introduced herself as Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," Attorney Walsh began, "we appreciate your cooperation in this investigation. However, we need to inform you that the scope of Ms. Martinez's alleged crimes extends far beyond what you initially reported." She opened a thick folder and spread several documents across the table. "Over the past 48 hours, we've received reports from 4 other small business owners who believe they may have been victims of similar fraud schemes orchestrated by Ms. Martinez." Marcus and I exchanged shocked glances. "Other businesses?" I asked. "A bakery in Tacoma, a landscaping company in Bellevue, a boutique clothing store in Capitol Hill, and a family restaurant in Ballard," Agent Martinez explained. In each case, Ms. Martinez approached the business owners claiming to be a marketing consultant, gained access to their financial systems, and allegedly embezzled substantial amounts of money. "How much money are we talking about?" Marcus asked quietly. "Combined with what she stole from your business, we're looking at approximately $300,000 across 5 different companies," Attorney Walsh said. "This elevates the charges from simple embezzlement to organized wire fraud, which carries much more serious federal penalties." I felt sick to my stomach. While I had been focused on protecting our family business, Claire had been systematically destroying other families' livelihoods across the Seattle area. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on the evidence we've collected so far, at least 3 years," Agent Martinez said. "Possibly longer. Ms. Martinez appears to have been running a sophisticated con operation, using her marriage to your brother-in-law as a cover for her criminal activities. That's why she married Marcus," I said, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. She needed the legitimacy of being part of an established business family to gain access to other business owners. That's our working theory, Attorney Walsh confirmed. Ms. Martinez used her connection to Chen Family Catering as a reference when approaching potential victims. She would claim to have helped your business grow and modernize, then offer similar services to other companies. Marcus looked like he might be sick. You're saying she used our reputation, our family name, to steal from other people? I'm afraid so. And that's not the worst part. Agent Martinez pulled out another set of documents. We've also discovered that Ms. Martinez has been in contact with several offshore banking institutions, apparently preparing to transfer the stolen funds out of the country. The break-in at your office last night appears to have been a desperate attempt to destroy evidence before fleeing. Fleeing? I asked. You think she's planning to run? We know she is, Attorney Walsh said grimly. We've been monitoring her communication since your initial report, and she's been making arrangements to leave the country. She has a flight booked to the Cayman Islands tomorrow morning, with connections to several non-extradition countries. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Claire managed to escape with the money she had stolen, not only would our business never recover the funds she had taken, but 4 other families would be left to deal with the financial devastation she had caused. What can we do to stop her? I asked. That's why you're here, Agent Martinez said. We need your help with a controlled operation to gather enough evidence to ensure she can't escape prosecution. She pulled out a recording device and placed it on the table between us. We want you to contact Ms. Martinez and arrange a meeting. We'll wire you for sound, and we need you to get her to admit to the theft and reveal where she's hidden the stolen money. That sounds incredibly dangerous, Marcus said immediately. If Claire is desperate enough to flee the country, what's to stop her from doing something violent to protect herself? We'll have agents positioned nearby, Agent Martinez assured him. But I won't lie to you. There is some risk involved. Ms. Martinez has already demonstrated that she's willing to commit serious crimes to cover her tracks. I thought about the note Claire had left in our ransacked office, the cold calculation behind her theft of our business funds, and the devastation she had caused to other innocent business owners. I'll do it, I said. Victoria, no, Marcus said immediately. It's too dangerous. We can find another way. There is no other way, I said firmly. If we don't stop her now, she'll disappear with hundreds of thousands of dollars that belong to hardworking families. I won't let that happen. Attorney Walsh leaned forward. Mrs. Chen, I need to be very clear about what we're asking. This isn't just about wearing a wire and having a conversation. We need you to convince Ms. Martinez to reveal specific details about her crimes, including where she's hidden the stolen money and how she's planning to transfer it offshore. She's already suspicious of you, and she knows you're the one who exposed her initial theft. Then I'll have to be very convincing, I said. What do you need me to say? The next several hours were spent planning every detail of the operation. The FBI agents coached me on what questions to ask, how to respond to Claire's likely attempts at manipulation, and what signals to give if I felt I was in danger. They fitted me with a nearly invisible recording device, and arranged for backup agents to be positioned around whatever location Claire chose for our meeting. The most challenging part was crafting a believable reason for wanting to meet with her. We finally settled on a story that would appeal to her greed and her ego. I would claim that I wanted to make a deal to avoid pursuing criminal charges, and that I was willing to help her escape in exchange for a share of the money she had stolen. Remember, Agent Martinez said as we prepared for me to make the call, Claire is going to be suspicious of any contact from you. You need to convince her that you're acting out of self-interest, not justice. Make her believe that you're just as greedy and morally flexible as she is. I took a deep breath and dialed Claire's number. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice wary and hostile. What do you want, Victoria? I want to make a deal, I said, trying to inject a note of desperation into my voice. This whole FBI investigation is spiraling out of control, and I'm going to get caught up in it if I don't do something. There was a long pause. What are you talking about? The money, Claire. The money I moved from the business accounts. The FBI is asking questions about whether I was working with you, whether I knew about the theft and helped cover it up. Another pause. Longer this time. And I need to know what your plan is. If you're gonna disappear and leave me here to face federal charges, I need to protect myself. Why should I trust you? Claire asked. You're the one who destroyed my life at Thanksgiving dinner. Because I'm the one who still has access to the money. I lied smoothly. The FBI thinks they've frozen your assets, but they don't know about the accounts I created. I can transfer those funds anywhere you want, but I need something in return. I could practically hear the wheels turning in Claire's head. What kind of something? Information. I need to know exactly how much you took, from which accounts, and over what time period. I need to know how you covered your tracks. And I need to know what your escape plan looks like. Why would you want to know all that? Because if I'm going to help you disappear, I need to make sure you're not leaving behind any evidence that could implicate me. And because if I'm taking this kind of risk, I want a cut of the money. The silence stretched so long that I thought Claire might have hung up. Finally, she spoke. Meet me at the Starbucks on Pine Street in an hour. Come alone, and don't even think about bringing your FBI friends. How do I know you won't just disappear without meeting me? Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because you have something I need, and I have something you need. But Victoria, if you're lying to me, if this is some kind of setup, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone with my heart racing. Agent Martinez immediately began coordinating with the surveillance team, while Attorney Walsh reviewed the legal implications of whatever Claire might reveal during our conversation. Remember, Agent Martinez said as I prepared to leave for the meeting, your safety is our primary concern. If at any point you feel threatened, give us the signal, and we'll move in immediately. The Starbucks on Pine Street was crowded with the usual mix of students, business people, and tourists that characterized downtown Seattle. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table near the back, where our conversation would be less likely to be overheard by other customers. The FBI's surveillance team was already in position, with agents disguised as customers scattered throughout the coffee shop. Claire arrived exactly on time, wearing dark sunglasses and a baseball cap that partially obscured her face. She looked thinner than she had at Thanksgiving, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting stress. You look terrible, I said as she sat down across from me. Gee, thanks. Prison orange isn't really my color anyway. She studied my face carefully. You're recording this conversation, aren't you? My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to remain calm. Why would I record anything? I'm trying to avoid federal charges, not collect evidence for the FBI. Because that's exactly what someone wearing a wire would say. Claire leaned back in her chair, her expression calculating. But let's assume for the moment that you're telling the truth. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we help each other, I said. You need access to the money I moved from the business accounts. I need to make sure this whole mess doesn't destroy my life along with yours. And how do you suggest we do that? You tell me everything. How much you took, how you did it, where the money is now, and what your plan is for getting out of the country. In exchange, I transfer the funds from my accounts to wherever you want them, and I take enough to make it worth the risk I'm taking. Claire was quiet for a long moment, studying my face as if trying to read my thoughts. You know, Victoria, I always underestimated you. I thought you were just a pathetic widow clinging to the past, but you're actually quite clever. Clever enough to see what you were doing to our business, I said, and clever enough to protect myself when I realized how deep your theft went. Is that what you think this was about? Theft? Claire laughed, but there was a bitter edge to it. This was about survival, Victoria. This was about building a life for myself in a world that doesn't give women like me any other options. Women like you? Women who weren't born into comfortable middle-class families with college educations and dead husbands who left them financially secure, Claire said, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself and lowered it again. I grew up in trailer parks and foster homes. I've been taking care of myself since I was 16 years old. Everything I have, I've had to fight for. So you decided to fight by stealing from hardworking families? I decided to fight by using whatever advantages I could find, Claire corrected. Marrying Marcus gave me access to a legitimate business, a respectable family, and most importantly, it gave me credibility when I approached other business owners. Despite myself, I found myself fascinated by her casual admission of guilt. So you planned this from the beginning? You married Marcus specifically to use our business as a cover for theft? I married Marcus because he was kind to me, and because he offered me a chance at the kind of life I'd never had before, Claire said. The business opportunities were just a bonus. Business opportunities, I repeated. Is that what you call stealing $300,000 from 5 different families? Claire's eyes widened slightly at the figure, and I realized that she hadn't known the FBI had identified the other victims. How do you know about the other businesses? Because the FBI has been investigating you for weeks, Claire. They know about the bakery in Tacoma, the landscaping company in Bellevue, all of it. They know about your offshore banking arrangements, and they know about your flight to the Cayman Islands tomorrow morning. For the first time since sitting down, Claire looked genuinely rattled. If they know all that, then why are you here? Why aren't they just arresting me? Because they want the money back, I said. All of it. And they know that if you disappear, those families will never see a penny of what you stole. Claire stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing. It was a harsh, desperate sound that made other customers glance in our direction. You really thought I was stupid enough to fall for this, didn't you? You thought I'd just confess everything while you recorded it all for your FBI friends. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Here's what's really going to happen, Victoria. I'm going to walk out of here, get on my flight tomorrow morning, and disappear forever. The money I took is already safely offshore, beyond the reach of your precious federal agents. And there's absolutely nothing you or anyone else can do to stop me. What about Marcus? I asked. What about the business? What about all the innocent people you've hurt? Marcus will survive. He's got you to take care of him now, doesn't he? As for the business, it was failing anyway. I just accelerated the inevitable. And the other families you stole from? Claire shrugged. They should have been more careful about who they trusted with their money. The callousness of her response sent a surge of anger through me. You destroyed people's lives, Claire. These were small businesses, family operations just like ours. Some of these people lost their entire life savings because of what you did. And I'm supposed to feel guilty about that? Claire asked. Where was their concern for me when I was living paycheck to paycheck, trying to build something better for myself? Where was their sympathy when I was struggling to survive in a world that rewards people like you and punishes people like me? People like me didn't steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from innocent families. People like you were born with advantages that people like me have to create for ourselves, Claire shot back. You had a husband who loved you, a stable career, financial security. I had to fight for every scrap of respectability I ever achieved. So you decided to tear down what other people had built, instead of building something legitimate for yourself. I decided to take what I needed to survive and thrive, Claire said. And now I'm going to disappear and live the kind of life I deserve, funded by money that those businesses will never miss. They'll miss it more than you think, I said quietly. The bakery in Tacoma? That was a family business too. The owner is a single mother with 3 kids, and the money you stole was her children's college fund. For just a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt cross Claire's face. Then it was gone, replaced by the same cold calculation I had come to recognize. That's very touching, Victoria, but it doesn't change anything. In 24 hours, I'll be sipping cocktails on a beach somewhere while you're explaining to the FBI why you couldn't deliver what you promised. She started to stand up, then paused and leaned down close to my ear. Oh, and Victoria, when you go home tonight, you might want to check your apartment very carefully. I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen to Daniel's precious widow. The threat was delivered in such a casual tone that it took a moment for the full impact to register. By the time I realized what she had said, Claire was already walking toward the exit, leaving me sitting alone at the table with my heart pounding and my mouth dry. I looked around the coffee shop, spotting the FBI agents who had been monitoring our conversation. Agent Martinez was already moving toward the exit, following Claire at a discreet distance, while another agent approached my table. Mrs. Chen, are you all right? He asked quietly. She just threatened me, I said, my voice shaking slightly. She knows where I live. We heard everything, the agent assured me. We're going to provide protection for you tonight, and we'll have agents watching Ms. Martinez until we can take her into custody. When will that be? Soon. She just confessed to multiple federal crimes while wearing a wire. We have everything we need now. As I walked to my car, escorted by 2 FBI agents, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire had one more surprise waiting for me. She had been planning her escape for weeks, maybe months, and someone that calculating wouldn't leave anything to chance. My phone buzzed with a text message as I reached my apartment building. It was from an unknown number, but I recognized Claire's writing style immediately. Check your mailbox. Consider it a farewell gift from your loving sister-in-law. One of the FBI agents opened my mailbox while the other positioned himself to watch for any threats. Inside was a manila envelope containing copies of financial documents that made my blood turn cold. "What is it?" Agent Martinez asked as she arrived at my building. I handed her the papers with shaking hands. Bank statements from accounts I've never seen before. Credit card statements with charges I never made. It looks like she's been using my identity to open accounts and run up debt. Agent Martinez flipped through the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. "Mrs. Chen, this shows nearly $50,000 in fraudulent charges over the past 6 months. Credit cards, personal loans, even a car loan, all in your name. How is that possible? Identity theft. She's been systematically destroying your credit while building her escape fund. Even if we arrest her tonight, you're going to be dealing with the financial fallout for years." I leaned against the wall of my apartment building, overwhelmed by the scope of Claire's vindictiveness. It wasn't enough for her to steal from our business and threaten my safety. She had to try to destroy my financial future as well. "There's more," Agent Martinez said grimly, pulling out the last document in the envelope. "This appears to be a forged will, allegedly signed by your late husband, leaving his share of the business entirely to Claire. The document was professionally prepared, with what looked like Daniel's signature at the bottom. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed it was real. But I recognized several details that were completely wrong, including a reference to a business partnership that had been dissolved years before Daniel's death. "She's been planning this for much longer than we realized," I said. "This isn't just about stealing money from the business. She's been trying to take over everything Daniel and I built together. Which is why we're not going to let her escape," Agent Martinez said firmly. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to go upstairs and pack a bag. We're moving you to a safe location tonight, and tomorrow morning we're going to arrest Claire before she can board that flight." As I packed a small suitcase under the watchful eyes of federal agents, I couldn't help but think about how much my life had changed since that terrible Thanksgiving dinner just a few weeks ago. I had thought that exposing Claire's theft would be the end of our family's nightmare, but it was starting to look like it had only been the beginning. My phone rang as I was zipping up my suitcase. The caller ID showed Marcus's number, and I could hear the strain in his voice before he even spoke. "Victoria, thank God you answered. Something's happened. Claire came to the house an hour ago with some kind of legal document. She's claiming that Daniel's will gives her ownership of the business, and she's demanding that I sign over my share to her. Marcus, where are you now? I'm locked in my bedroom. She's downstairs with 2 men I've never seen before, and they're going through all of Daniel's papers. I think she's looking for the original business partnership documents." Agent Martinez grabbed the phone from my hand. "Mr. Chen, this is Agent Martinez with the FBI. Are you in immediate physical danger?" "I don't think so, but I can hear them moving around downstairs, and one of the men has been asking about safe deposit boxes and hidden documents. We're sending a team to your location immediately. Do not leave your room, do not confront them, and do not sign anything they give you." As Agent Martinez coordinated the response to Marcus's house, I found myself thinking about Claire's desperation and what it might drive her to do. She had already committed identity theft, embezzlement, and now what appeared to be breaking and entering. How far was she willing to go to escape justice and secure her stolen fortune? The answer came faster than I expected, in the form of a phone call that would change everything once again. "Mrs. Chen," Agent Martinez said, hanging up her radio after a brief conversation with the agents at Marcus's house, "we have a problem. When our team arrived at your brother-in-law's house, they found it empty. No sign of Ms. Martinez, no sign of the men he described, and no sign of Mr. Chen himself." The room spun around me. "What do you mean, no sign of Marcus?" "I mean your brother-in-law is missing, Mrs. Chen." And we have every reason to believe that Claire Martinez has taken him. The silence in the FBI field office was suffocating as Agent Martinez coordinated the massive manhunt that had been launched within minutes of discovering Marcus's disappearance. Phone calls were being made to airports, border crossings, and local law enforcement agencies throughout the Pacific Northwest. But with each passing hour, it became increasingly clear that Claire had planned this final desperate gambit as carefully as she had orchestrated everything else. I sat in the same conference room where I had agreed to wear a wire just hours earlier, staring at crime scene photos from Marcus's house that showed clear signs of a struggle. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, and most chilling of all, droplets of blood on the kitchen floor that DNA testing would later confirm belonged to my brother-in-law. "Mrs. Chen," Attorney Walsh said gently, sitting down across from me with a fresh cup of coffee. "I know this is incredibly difficult, but we need you to think carefully about anything Claire might have said that could give us a clue about where she's taken Marcus." I replayed our conversation at the Starbucks over and over in my mind, searching for any detail that might help. She mentioned the Cayman Islands, but that was about her flight plans. She also said something about sipping cocktails on a beach, but that could be anywhere. What about the men Marcus mentioned? Did Claire ever talk about having partners or associates? Never. She always presented herself as working alone. But obviously, that was another lie. I paused, remembering something that had seemed insignificant at the time. Wait. At Thanksgiving dinner, her brother Tommy was there. He was the one she'd been paying for fake social media work. Marcus said the men at his house were strangers. But what if Tommy brought friends? Agent Martinez immediately picked up her phone and began coordinating surveillance on Tommy's known addresses. But even as the FBI mobilized every available resource, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial about Claire's endgame. "Agent Martinez," I said suddenly, "what if this isn't about escape anymore? What if she's given up on running and decided to go for revenge instead?" "What do you mean?" "Think about it. She knows we have recordings of her confessing to multiple felonies. She knows her offshore accounts are being traced. She knows she can't realistically disappear now that the FBI is involved. So what if she's decided that if she's going down, she's taking everyone with her?" The possibility sent a chill through the room. If Claire had abandoned any hope of escape and was operating purely out of vindictiveness, there was no predicting what she might do to Marcus or anyone else she blamed for her downfall. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Agent Martinez motioned for me to answer while she activated recording equipment. "Victoria!" Claire's voice came through the speaker, artificially calm and controlled. "I trust you enjoyed our little chat this afternoon." "Where's Marcus, Claire?" "Marcus is safe for now. He's keeping me company while I make some final arrangements for our departure." "What do you want?" "I want what I've always wanted, Victoria. I want the respect and financial security that should have been mine from the beginning. Unfortunately, your interference has made that somewhat more complicated to achieve." Agent Martinez was frantically signaling to technicians who were working to trace the call. I tried to keep Claire talking while they worked. "It doesn't have to be complicated, Claire. Tell me where you are and we can work something out." "Oh, but it does have to be complicated, Victoria. You see, I've had several hours to think about our situation, and I've realized that the only way for me to get what I deserve is to eliminate the obstacles that have been standing in my way." "I don't understand." "Of course you don't. You've never had to fight for anything in your comfortable little life. But let me explain it in terms you can understand. Marcus is going to sign over his share of the business to me, just as the forged will I prepared indicates he should. Then you're going to transfer all the money from your secret accounts to offshore locations I specify. And finally, you're both going to disappear permanently, leaving me free to rebuild my life without interference." The casual way she described planning our murders made my blood freeze. "Claire, killing us won't solve your problems. The FBI already has evidence of everything you've done. Murdering Marcus and me will only add federal homicide charges to your list of crimes. Perhaps. But it will also eliminate the primary witnesses against me and give me access to enough money to disappear more permanently than I had originally planned." Agent Martinez passed me a note. "Keep her talking. We're getting close to a location." "Where are you planning to go?" I asked. "Even if you kill us, the FBI will never stop looking for you." The FBI is less persistent than you might think when it comes to tracking fugitives who are no longer in the United States. Especially fugitives who have enough money to buy new identities and blend into populations where American law enforcement has limited reach. "And you think Marcus will just cooperate with signing over the business?" There was a pause, then a sound that made my heart stop. Marcus's voice, strained and obviously under duress. "Victoria, don't give her anything, she's going to kill us anyway. Don't let her win." The line went dead immediately after Marcus spoke, leaving me staring at the phone with tears streaming down my face. Agent Martinez was already coordinating with the tech team, but I could see from their expressions that they hadn't been able to complete the trace. "We got a general area," one of the technicians reported. "The call originated from somewhere in the industrial district south of downtown, but we couldn't narrow it down further than about a 6-block radius. That's still dozens of warehouses and abandoned buildings," Agent Martinez said grimly. "We need more specific intelligence." As FBI teams prepared to search the industrial district, I found myself thinking about everything I knew about Claire's psychology and methodology. She was meticulous in her planning, always looking for ways to maximize her advantage while minimizing her risk. She wouldn't have chosen a random location for her final confrontation with Marcus and me. It would be somewhere that served multiple purposes, somewhere that gave her tactical advantages. "Agent Martinez," I said suddenly, "what if she's not planning to run at all? What if the whole offshore banking story was misdirection?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if her real plan is to fake her own death along with ours? She could burn down whatever building she's in, destroy all the evidence of her crimes, and emerge with a new identity while everyone thinks she's dead." Agent Martinez stared at me for a moment, then began making rapid phone calls. "We need arson investigators standing by, and we need to prioritize buildings with accelerant storage or other fire hazards." While the FBI coordinated their search efforts, I made a decision that I knew they wouldn't approve of. Claire had made this personal when she dragged Marcus into her final desperate scheme, and I wasn't going to sit in a conference room while she tortured and potentially murdered the only family I had left. "I need to use the restroom," I told Agent Martinez, standing up from the conference table. "Mrs. Chen, I don't think you should be alone right now. Let me have an agent escort you." "I'm going 10 feet down the hall," I said. "I think I can manage that without Claire jumping out of a supply closet." But instead of going to the restroom, I slipped out of the building through a side exit and got into my car. I had been thinking about Claire's possible locations, and there was one place that made perfect sense given her psychological profile and her need for symbolic revenge. The original Chen family catering building was a small warehouse in the industrial district that Daniel and Marcus had purchased when they first expanded beyond their food truck operation. They had moved to larger facilities 2 years ago, but they still owned the old building and occasionally used it for storage. It was isolated, filled with commercial cooking equipment and cleaning supplies that could easily be used as accelerants. And most importantly, it represented everything that Daniel and I had built together. If Claire wanted to destroy our family legacy while faking her own death, the original catering facility would be the perfect location for her final act of revenge. I drove through the industrial district as quickly as I dared, trying to spot any FBI surveillance teams while heading toward the old warehouse. The area was largely deserted at night, with most of the businesses closed and minimal street lighting. As I approached the Chen family catering building, I could see light coming from windows that should have been dark. I parked 2 blocks away and approached the building on foot, my heart pounding as I tried to figure out what to do next. I had no weapon, no backup, and no real plan beyond confirming that Claire and Marcus were inside. But as I got closer to the building, I could hear voices coming from inside, confirming my suspicions. The rear entrance to the building had been left unlocked, and I slipped inside as quietly as possible. The main warehouse space was dimly lit by several camping lanterns, and I could see 3 figures near the center of the room. Marcus was tied to a chair, his face bruised, but his eyes alert. Claire stood nearby, holding what appeared to be a small pistol, while a man I recognized as her brother Tommy was pouring liquid from several containers around the warehouse floor. "I have to admit, Marcus," Claire was saying, "I'm almost sorry it's come to this. You were always kind to me, even when your precious sister-in-law was trying to undermine our marriage." "Victoria was trying to protect the business," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse but defiant. "She saw what you really were long before I did." "Victoria saw what she wanted to see," Claire corrected. A threat to her comfortable position as the grieving widow who controlled the family finances. She couldn't stand the idea of sharing that power with someone younger and more capable. "More capable?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from innocent families. You destroyed people's lives for money. What's capable about that?" Quote. Claire backhanded him across the face, the sound echoing through the warehouse. "I survived, Marcus. I created opportunities where none existed. I built wealth from nothing while people like Victoria inherited their advantages." "You built nothing," Marcus said, spitting blood. "You're a parasite who feeds off other people's work." I watched this exchange while trying to figure out how to help Marcus without getting us both killed. Tommy had finished spreading what smelled like gasoline around the warehouse floor and was now working on the walls. Claire clearly intended to burn the building down with Marcus inside, probably planning to claim that he had discovered her theft and confronted her before being killed in an accidental fire. My phone vibrated with a text message that I was afraid to check, worried that the sound might alert Claire to my presence. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw a message from Agent Martinez that made my heart race. "Your phone GPS shows you're near the old catering building. FBI teams are 2 minutes out. Do not engage. Get to safety immediately." 2 minutes might as well have been 2 hours if Claire was planning to shoot Marcus and set the building on fire. I needed to create a distraction that would delay her plans long enough for the FBI to arrive. The warehouse was filled with old equipment from the catering business, including several industrial-sized pots and pans that Daniel and I had used for large events. If I could create enough noise to distract Claire and Tommy, it might give Marcus a chance to escape or at least survive until help arrived. I picked up the largest pot I could find and hurled it across the warehouse, where it crashed into a stack of metal shelving with a sound like thunder. Claire spun around immediately, pointing her gun toward the source of the noise. "Tommy, check that out," she ordered. "Someone's here." But instead of waiting for Tommy to investigate, I picked up another pot and threw it in a different direction, then immediately moved to a new position among the stored equipment. The key was to keep them guessing about how many people were in the building and where they might be located. "Victoria," Claire called out. "I know you're here. Come out now, and I'll make this quick for both of you. Keep playing games, and I'll make Marcus suffer before I kill him." I ignored her threats and continued moving through the warehouse, making noise in different locations to confuse them about my position. But my amateur tactics could only work for so long against someone desperate enough to commit murder. "Enough," Claire said finally. She pressed the gun against Marcus's head. "Victoria, you have 10 seconds to show yourself, or I'm going to blow your brother-in-law's brains out." I had no choice. I stepped out from behind a storage rack with my hands raised. "I'm here, Claire. Let Marcus go." "How touching!" The devoted sister-in-law comes to the rescue. Claire kept the gun pointed at Marcus while gesturing for me to move closer. "Tommy, tie her up next to her beloved family member." As Tommy approached me with rope, I could hear the distant sound of sirens getting closer. Claire heard them too, and her expression hardened. "It seems your FBI friends are more competent than I gave them credit for," she said. "No matter. We'll just have to accelerate our timeline." She raised the gun toward Marcus, and I knew I had seconds to act before she pulled the trigger. The warehouse floor was slick with gasoline that Tommy had poured everywhere, and Claire was standing in the middle of a particularly large puddle. If I could create a spark, the resulting fire might distract her long enough for Marcus and me to escape. The camping lanterns Claire had been using for light were old-fashioned gas-powered models, the kind that used pressurized fuel and had exposed flames. If I could knock one over into the gasoline, it would create an explosion that might save our lives or kill us all. "Claire," I said, taking a step closer to one of the lanterns. "You don't have to do this. The FBI is about to surround this building. If you surrender now, you might be able to negotiate a plea deal." "Negotiate?" Claire laughed. "Victoria, I'm looking at life in federal prison. There's nothing left to negotiate." "There's always something left," I said, taking another step toward the lantern. "You're still young. You could serve your time and rebuild your life when you get out." "Rebuild my life as a convicted felon? I don't think so." I lunged for the lantern, grabbing it and hurling it into the largest pool of gasoline near Claire's feet. The explosion was immediate and devastating, a wall of flame that engulfed half the warehouse in seconds. Claire screamed and dove away from the fire, dropping her gun in the process. The heat was overwhelming, but I could see Marcus struggling with his ropes while Tommy ran toward an exit. I grabbed a knife from a nearby prep table and cut Marcus free, then we both stumbled toward the rear entrance through thick smoke and spreading flames. "Victoria, wait!" Marcus gasped as we reached the door. "Where's Claire?" I looked back through the smoke and saw her silhouette near the front of the building, apparently cut off from escape by the fire. For a moment I felt a surge of satisfaction that her own plan had trapped her. Then I remembered that whatever else she was, Claire was still a human being who didn't deserve to burn to death. "Marcus, get outside and find the FBI agents," I said. "I'm going to try to help Claire." "Are you insane? She was about to kill us both. Just go, please." I turned back into the burning warehouse, covering my mouth and nose with my shirt as I searched for Claire through the smoke. I found her near the front entrance, unconscious and badly burned but still breathing. The front door was blocked by fallen debris, but there was a window nearby that might offer an escape route. Dragging an unconscious person through a burning building while inhaling toxic smoke was not something I had ever imagined myself doing, but adrenaline and determination carried me forward. I managed to get Claire to the window and break the glass with a piece of equipment, then push her through to safety before collapsing from smoke inhalation. The next thing I remembered was waking up in a hospital bed with Agent Martinez sitting beside me, looking both relieved and annoyed. "Mrs. Chen, what you did tonight was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid," she said. "You could have been killed. Is Marcus okay?" "Mr. Chen is fine. Minor smoke inhalation, some bruises from being tied up, but nothing serious. He's been asking about you constantly." "What about Claire?" "She's alive, but in critical condition, with second and third degree burns over 30% of her body. She'll be in the hospital for months before she's well enough to stand trial." "And Tommy?" "Thomas Martinez was arrested fleeing the scene. He's cooperating fully with our investigation, providing details about his sister's criminal activities and the names of other people who helped her." Agent Martinez pulled out a folder and set it on my bedside table. "Mrs. Chen, I have some news about the financial aspects of this case that I think you'll want to hear." I struggled to sit up in the hospital bed, still feeling the effects of smoke inhalation. "What kind of news?" "We've recovered almost all of the money Ms. Martinez stole from your business and the others. The offshore accounts she set up were more accessible than she realized, and our financial crimes unit was able to trace and freeze the funds before she could move them again." "All of it?" "Approximately 95%. There were some transaction fees and currency exchange costs, but the vast majority of the stolen money will be returned to the victims." The relief was overwhelming. Not just for our business, but for the other families Claire had targeted. "What about the identity theft? The fake accounts she opened in my name? Those are being resolved as well. Since we have clear evidence that Ms. Martinez committed identity theft, the credit agencies and financial institutions are cooperating fully to restore your credit and remove the fraudulent accounts." Agent Martinez leaned forward, her expression serious. "Mrs. Chen, there's something else you should know. When we searched the warehouse after the fire, we found evidence that Ms. Martinez had been planning this confrontation for weeks. She had detailed plans for disposing of your bodies, along with fake documents that would have made it appear that you and Mr. Chen had embezzled money from the business before fleeing the country. She wanted people to think we were the criminals. She wanted to rewrite the entire narrative. In her version, you and Marcus were the thieves who had been stealing from the business, and she was the innocent victim who discovered your crimes." The fire was supposed to destroy all evidence to the contrary, while eliminating the witnesses who could contradict her story. I thought about the sophisticated planning that had gone into Claire's scheme, from her initial infiltration of our family to her final desperate attempt at revenge. How long do you think she'll be in prison? With the charges we're bringing? Multiple counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, identity theft, kidnapping, attempted murder, and arson. She's looking at 30 to 40 years in federal prison, assuming she survives her injuries and is mentally competent to stand trial. Marcus arrived as Agent Martinez was leaving, carrying flowers and looking exhausted but relieved. He hugged me carefully, mindful of the oxygen tubes and monitoring equipment. "I can't believe you came back for her," he said. "After everything she did to us, you risked your life to save her." "I couldn't just let her burn," I said. "Besides, I wanted her to face justice for what she did, not escape through death. The doctors say you should make a full recovery, but you'll need to take it easy for a few weeks." "What about the business?" Marcus smiled for the first time since this whole nightmare began. "The business is going to be fine. Better than fine, actually. The publicity from this case has generated interest from several major corporate clients who want to work with a company that showed such integrity in the face of fraud." He pulled out a newspaper clipping and showed me the headline, "Local Business Owners Expose $1 Million Fraud Scheme." The article portrayed us as heroes who had risked everything to bring a criminal to justice and protect other innocent victims. "We're also getting calls from other small business owners who want advice on protecting themselves from similar fraud," Marcus continued. "I think there might be a consulting opportunity there, helping other family businesses implement better financial controls." Over the following months, as I recovered from my injuries and Claire slowly healed in the prison hospital ward, the full scope of her criminal activities became clear. The FBI investigation revealed that she had been running variations of her embezzlement scheme for nearly 5 years, targeting small businesses across 3 states and stealing an estimated $2 million. Some of her victims had been forced to close their businesses because of the financial damage she caused. Others had lost their homes, their retirement savings, or their children's college funds. The trail of devastation she left behind was staggering, and it served as a sobering reminder of how much damage one person's greed and selfishness could cause. But there were also stories of resilience and recovery. The bakery owner in Tacoma used the recovered funds to expand her operation and hire 3 new employees. The landscaping company in Bellevue invested in new equipment and won several major contracts. The restaurant in Ballard renovated their dining room and started offering catering services that competed directly with businesses like ours. As for Chen Family Catering, we not only survived Claire's assault on our business but emerged stronger than ever. The recovered funds allowed us to expand our operations, hire additional staff, and develop the consulting services Marcus had envisioned. We also established a foundation that provided grants to small businesses affected by fraud, using a portion of our profits to help other families recover from financial crimes. The trial, when it finally began, was a media sensation. Claire's attorney tried to portray her as a victim of poverty and abuse, who had made desperate choices to escape a cycle of disadvantage. But the overwhelming evidence of her calculated, systematic theft from multiple families made it impossible to generate much sympathy for her circumstances. I testified for 3 days, describing the years of manipulation and deception that had culminated in that terrible Thanksgiving dinner confrontation. Marcus testified about the kidnapping and death threats. The other business owners Claire had victimized told their stories of financial ruin and betrayal. Claire herself never testified, sitting silently at the defense table with bandages still covering the worst of her burn scars. She showed no emotion as victim after victim described the impact of her crimes on their families and businesses. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Claire was sentenced to 38 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, along with restitution payments that would continue long after her release. As I walked out of the courthouse after the sentencing, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Justice had been served, but the cost had been enormous for everyone involved. Claire would spend the rest of her productive life in prison, Marcus had to rebuild his faith in relationships and trust, and dozens of families had suffered financial devastation that would take years to fully recover from. But there was also a sense of closure and renewal. The business Daniel and I had built together had not only survived but thrived in the face of unprecedented challenges. The family bonds between Marcus and me had been strengthened rather than broken by the crisis. And we had used our experience to help other families protect themselves from similar crimes. 3 years later, as I prepared for another Thanksgiving dinner at Marcus's new house, I reflected on how much had changed since that catastrophic dinner when Claire had called me useless in front of our entire family. Her attempt to humiliate and marginalize me had instead revealed her own criminality and led to her downfall. The Thanksgiving guest list was different now. Marcus had remarried, this time to Sarah, a fellow small business owner who understood the challenges and rewards of building something from nothing. She brought 2 teenage children from her previous marriage, and they had blended into our family with the ease that comes from genuine affection and shared values. The other guests included several of the business owners who had been victimized by Claire but had recovered and prospered in the years since. The bakery owner from Tacoma, the landscaping contractor from Bellevue, and the restaurant owner from Ballard had all become close friends, bound together by their shared experience of surviving financial crime and rebuilding their lives. As we sat around the table sharing what we were grateful for, I thought about the strange turns life can take. Claire's greed and manipulation had brought us all together in ways that never would have happened otherwise. Her attempt to destroy our businesses had instead created a network of mutual support and friendship that enriched all of our lives. "I'm grateful for family," Marcus said when it was his turn, looking around the table at the assembled group. "Not just the family you're born into, but the family you choose and the family that chooses you." When it was my turn, I raised my glass of wine and looked at the faces around the table. Daniel's photo sat in a place of honor on the sideboard, and I could almost imagine him smiling at the gathering of friends and family who had emerged from the ashes of Claire's destructive schemes. "I'm grateful for the truth," I said. "Even when it's painful, even when it's difficult to accept, the truth eventually sets us free and allows us to build something better on more solid foundations." Later that evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Sarah pulled me aside. "Victoria, I have something to tell you. Marcus and I have been talking, and we want to know if you'd be interested in becoming a full partner in the business. Not just financially, but as an equal owner with equal decision-making authority." I was touched by the offer, but I shook my head. The business should stay in the Chen family. That's what Daniel would have wanted. "Victoria," Marcus said, appearing beside his wife, "you are Chen family. You've been more loyal to Daniel's legacy than anyone, including me. The business wouldn't exist without your protection and sacrifice." I looked around the kitchen where we had gathered, thinking about all the meals Daniel and I had planned in our own kitchen, all the dreams we had shared about building something lasting together. The business had survived and thrived, but more importantly, the values we had tried to build it on, honesty, hard work, family loyalty, had proven stronger than greed and deception. "All right," I said finally, "but only if we can establish a scholarship fund for business students who want to learn about financial ethics and fraud prevention." Daniel always believed that education was the best protection against crime. "Deal," Marcus said, hugging me tightly. As I drove home that night, I thought about Claire, now serving the 3rd year of her prison sentence. I had heard from Agent Martinez that she had been participating in educational programs and working in the prison kitchen, perhaps finally learning honest skills that could help her build a legitimate life when she was eventually released. I felt no satisfaction in her imprisonment, but I felt profound gratitude that her reign of manipulation and theft had ended before she could destroy any more families. Sometimes, the greatest victory is simply preventing further harm, protecting the innocent, and creating space for healing and growth. The secret accounts I had used to protect our business assets had been closed years ago, their purpose fulfilled. But I had learned something important about the power of preparation, vigilance, and strategic thinking in the face of betrayal. Sometimes the best defense against those who would take advantage of your trust is to trust, but verify, and to always be prepared to protect what matters most. The business Daniel and I had built together continued to grow and prosper, serving as a testament to the enduring power of honest work and genuine relationships. And every Thanksgiving, as we gathered with friends and family to celebrate our blessings, I remembered that sometimes the people who call you useless are really just revealing their own fear that you're far more powerful than they want to admit. Claire had tried to diminish me with her words and destroy me with her actions, but in the end, she had only succeeded in proving that integrity and determination are stronger than greed and manipulation. The secret accounts were gone, but the strength they had represented, the willingness to fight for what's right, to protect the innocent, and to never give up on justice, remained as powerful as ever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.